Memories of the past, visions of the future. The ties that bind and the conflicts that tear us apart. Ours is a shared experience passed down to us through our history, literature, arts, and philosophy, or in one word, humanities. This is Humanities in the Spotlight.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. I am delighted to speak to two distinguished graduates of the University of Texas this evening, Susan Palumbo and Kent McGoy, both of whom are outstanding public servants to the university and to their communities. Susan received her BA in Plan 2 in 1980 and her MBA from the University of Minnesota in 2001. And Kent received his BA in Plan 2 in 1994 and his MBA from Harvard University in 1998. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the humanities. And we're talking about disciplines in the arts, languages, literature, history, philosophy, and religion, dedicated to the exploration of the human experience in all of its complexity, messiness, and diversity. More specifically, in relation to Susan and Kent's own experiences. So welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and thinking about the humanities as a form of storytelling, I would love it if you could start, Susan, by telling us your story.
Well, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was the youngest of 3 children, and fell in love with Texas and the lure, and particularly the Plan 2 program here at the University of Texas at Austin. And so I traveled south, and I married after I got out of college. We have been married for 32 years, and we have 3 children. One is a school teacher in St. Louis right now, and the other 2 are in college. I have one here at the College of Liberal Arts at UT, and the other one is at Vanderbilt. And so I'm getting ready to embark on a whole new stage of being an empty nester here in Austin. We lived in Minneapolis for 30 years. And I would say that my career really spans 3 different phases. And the first is I was an advertising entrepreneur. And then the second phase of my career was working for other entrepreneurs. And I spent about 12 years helping them sell their businesses to publicly held companies. And my current role is as an advisor to entrepreneurs. So there's been certainly an entrepreneurial thread in my experience, and a lot to do with the humanities throughout all of the different chapters of my career.
Fantastic. And Kent, how about you?
I grew up in Houston, was a Plan 2 major. When I graduated from Plan 2, I moved back to Houston and worked for an investment bank called Simmons & Company. I went to Harvard Business School from Simmons & Company, and when I was getting out of Harvard, I was trying to figure out how to get back to Texas.
Absolutely. And
I was dying to be in the investment business, and fortunately I found a guy who was a great investor, a great mentor, also a UT grad, also a Harvard grad, a guy named Rusty Rose. Right. So I moved to Dallas, and I worked with Rusty for about 14 years. I have an investment business in Dallas now. We're kind of a mix between a hedge fund and a private equity business. We invest capital primarily for university endowments. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for almost 18 years. Mm-hmm. We have twin daughters who are 12 and are in the 5th grade.
Fantastic. And so I'm wondering, just kind of building upon your story, if there was at UT a particular humanities moment that you would like to highlight in your kind of recollections of your college years. And Kent, how about you?
Well, so, you know, the famous Plan 2 class your first year is Plan 2 English. My professor was Dr. Twombly, and Dr. Twombly's kind of signature was the entire first semester you studied Hamlet. And I remember thinking, how do you study Hamlet for a whole semester? And then I remember people asking me all semester, how do you study Hamlet for a whole semester? But the deeper you go, kind of the deeper it gets. And it was a really great experience, kind of continuing to peel back the onion and peel back the onion and peel back the onion. What's funny about it is that our investment philosophy is very concentrated, and so we'll spend a lot of time on one investment. So people now will say, well, how do you spend 2 years researching one investment? And it's what I learned with Professor Twombly, back in English as a freshman.
Yes, absolutely. How about you, Susan?
And I think two moments really stick out for me, and one is my English professor, Dr. Ambrose Gordon, who was was born in 1920 and such a quintessential gentleman, and I have so many just really vivid moments of the way he would depict characters and draw our attention to passages that would illuminate these wonderful discussions. And I ended up going on to do my thesis with him as my sponsor, and just really had a wonderful, wonderful experience. And the other one is an early Plan 2 class, which when I was in Plan 2, it was biology with Dr. Irwin Spear, and it was an unbelievably rigorous experience. But I think it really taught me that I could accomplish a wide breadth of material. And when in the third chapter of my career I decided to move into financial services, I think it gave me a lot of confidence that I would be able to go in and master a lot of quantitative subject matter with investments and a lot of quantitative analysis without really worrying about whether or not I could do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that begs this other question of, given your careers as a certified financial planner and in finance and investment banking, thinking about how the humanities have shaped the way you work and the kinds of ways that you problem solve in your work. And so I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, Janet, I mean, I think the world is subjective and it's ambiguous, and for me, in education, the humanities has helped me kind of see it in 3 dimensions. And our business, we're trying to find sort of wide gaps between perception and reality, and it's this sort of multidisciplinary exposure to English, history, philosophy, economics, psychology, that helps you see things differently, and hopefully helps you see around corners sometimes. And in what we do, we're trying to figure out and form an innovative thesis, and then we're trying to do really great primary research, and then we're trying to take all our research and take that thesis and communicate it. And those at their core are all things that I learned in Plan 2.
Exactly, that's what I'm telling my students to do in my American Studies classes and my history classes. So absolutely, that same process. Yes, how about you, Susan?
In my career in private wealth management, when I got out of college, the people who typically went into that field really loved stocks and probably had been tinkering around and doing some investing, and they got into this field because they really loved stocks. And over the course of a lot of years, the business has really changed. And today, it's really a lot less about picking the right stock or what's the beta or what's the Sharps ratio. All of that is certainly part of it. But today, it's really much more around listening to clients, helping them articulate their goals, helping them feel confident about a path and a plan to reach those goals. And so, there are thousands of people at Merrill Lynch that do a lot of those analyses, and I have the benefit of a lot of people that are technical analysts. They look at fundamentals. We have country analysts, we have industry analysts, and there's a ton of data out there. But really, at the end of the day, my responsibility is working with clients, helping them establish their goals, and then really developing unique and custom approaches that are going to be a good fit for what their situation is. And so that really requires a lot of ambiguous information. It's a lot of assimilation of information. It's a lot of really listening, asking questions, being curious about what they're looking for. And so really, although my major is not typical of of most of the people in my field, I think in the future it will be, because there are so many skills on the softer side with communication and people skills that I think it will be much more common in the future.
And Susan, one thing to add to that, for the same reason that you talk about the thousands of people and all the resources that are hammering on the hard things and the things that you can analyze and break down and things that a computer can do, the edge in our business is gone in those areas, and it is the softer skills where you come back and you can find an edge.
And definitely what you're saying is that, I mean, the humanities allows us to step imaginatively into the lives of other people and other experiences, and that seems to be an essential part of your work. And so thinking about empathy and ethics as well, I was just curious as to how those qualities have helped in your work through your learning and your education in the humanities.
Well, I think that, of course, ethics is a big topic in financial services. After, the Madoff crisis, after the financial crisis, there's been, a lot more emphasis, certainly on compliance, but also on ethics. And so I have to say that I feel really supported by my company, Bank of America and Merrill Lynch, and I feel like there's really a values alignment with the company that I work for, and that feels really good. But, compliance is part of it. Ethics is certainly part of our CE and part of our training. But I think that really comes deep from who you are, how I was raised as a child, what my parents taught me, who I am, and certainly, my education in the humanities. I mean, it really, we spent so much time studying about great leaders and their wonderful qualities, whether they were from literature or from history or even some of the great philosophers. But we also studied character flaws, and we analyzed those character flaws. And I think often about that today because it was really great training, and it's something that I bring into my work because we're having to make decisions all the time about that. And you also ask about empathy. Again, in my side of the business, in the private client side, it's really all about curiosity, interest in other people. My job is really about helping other people. And I think, people can see if you genuinely are interested in their well-being and what they're trying to accomplish and not. And I think the people that are successful in these roles, have that ability.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think building on what Susan was saying, ethics is something that we model, and starting with our parents and our friends, our families, to teachers, but then I think as you move through the humanities and as you were saying, exposure to history, you have exposure to these great thinkers in philosophy and psychology. You have you read this incredible literature about these incredible literary characters, and it gives you such a wealth of models to choose from and to say, I want to be like that, I don't want to be like that. And I feel like we're a product of a lot of our experiences, but to the extent that we can learn from other people's experiences or other people's imaginations, it makes us that much better.
Definitely. There's this definite humanity in being able to step outside of ourselves, for sure. Yeah. And so thinking then also about your lives outside of your work, How have the humanities been instrumental in shaping who you are in terms of your play, in terms of family life, in terms of anything related to helping the community and giving back and in all sorts of ways?
I mean, for me, I think it's really been just a love of learning, and whether that's trying to explore intellectually, or whether that's having fun finding truth in a new place you haven't found it before, or figuring out a new hobby, or even with my girls at 12, they're getting to this age where when you ask them, "Hey, how was school today?" It's like, "Fine," and so. So our new game is we'll say, okay, well, tell me a fun fact from today. And it's a very sort of liberal arts thing. And they turn on and they'll talk for 10 or 20 minutes. And so, even in our day-to-day family life, I feel like liberal arts is what opens my kids up.
Definitely, and they're having to think critically to figure out what that highlight was. Yeah, that fun fact, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I love that story because it sparks an idea for me. My kids are now out of the K-12 school system, but interesting because when they moved in those years where you got these yes or no answers, particularly with my two boys, I found that I would take their school reading list and I would start reading the books that they were reading, and then we would be able to kind of have this neutral conversation. And still to this day, my kids are almost 26 and 22 and 22. I'm still reading the books that they are, and I think that then goes back to that humanities base where we read and we discuss things, and we started that, and we still continue. So last year I was power reading, maybe not the best literature, but Game of Thrones. So I got through.
It's got it all, that's for sure.
We're reading the Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with the girls right now, and talk about a book that teaches empathy.
Yes.
So it is the arts kind of hit you everywhere.
And I think that for me, the humanities, it's allowed me over a lot of years of working, because I worked all the way through, having kids. It really allowed me to, I think, put work in context with my life.
Yes.
And so, the humanities really taught me that to live a full life.
Definitely. And building that kind of community around those discussions, too, of works of art, literature. I mean, it brings people together, for sure. And so I'd like to come back to one of the themes that both of you have mentioned, and it relates to leadership in the humanities, because it's a stunning kind of fact that there are so many Fortune 500 company leaders who have humanities degrees, and political leaders who have humanities degrees. And so I was just wanting to hear your thoughts about that relationship, as well as the fact that it's really a kind of under the radar reality. We often don't hear much about the fact that humanities have been so influential in the formation of our leaders.
Yeah, the stat, I think, the fun fact is that a third of Fortune 500 CEOs are liberal arts majors, but the amazing thing to me, and maybe it's because I'm in the finance world, is that if you look at the sort of top tier leaders in American finance, it's folks with liberal arts degrees. And so, it's the CEO of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, it's George Soros, it's Carl Icahn, it's the guys who are at the very top of this profession are liberal arts majors. And why is that? It's because this is complex. This is changing. You need people who are adaptable. You need people who can communicate. And these are liberal arts skills. And I think maybe one of the best examples we have of a leader that we think of as a technology leader, but also with a liberal arts bent, is Steve Jobs. And so I have this one quote from Steve Jobs that I think is just fantastic. He said this in 2010. He said, it's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. He said, it's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields the results that make our hearts sing. And so if you think about what is Apple's edge, it is this deep technological expertise, but it's married with this deep appreciation for the humanities that starts with the leadership. It goes through the culture, it goes through the product design. And so these guys are creating what is, maybe the most powerful brand in the history of the world. And it's this combination. You compare Apple to, say, BlackBerry. And BlackBerry has every bit of technological expertise that Apple has. And BlackBerry was the first mover in smartphones. Yes. But there's something missing. There's something intangible. You can't put your finger on why Apple is better than BlackBerry, but it's there, and that's the humanities. And the difference is a company that's on the verge of being a $1 trillion company and a company that's on the verge of bankruptcy. And I think that really shows where the leadership and the focus on humanities inside these big organizations and in the product design and in technology pays off.
Definitely. And as this communications universe in the palm of your hand, and it feels so smooth and comfortable in the palm of your hand.
Yes,
so it is really a great marriage.
It's art, right?
Yeah, of art and everything else. Susan.
And I was just going to say that I think the world is changing and moving so fast, and even as much education and continuing education as our field has, you just can't simply keep up with it. And so you really need leaders that are nimble, that can deal with ambiguity, that can deal with data coming in from all different directions, all different kinds of changing market conditions, changing economic conditions, changing global situations, different political. And really at the end of the day, you have to have people that can take all of that in and then take a leap of faith and make a decision. And all of the, finance training that I may have that give me the formulas, and, I've got all these great computers that can run all of these things. Really, at the end of the day, we have to make those leap of faith decisions based on the unique characteristics. And I really feel like, for me, the humanities have given me that capability, and other leaders that I've seen throughout our organization.
So this is so great and fascinating to hear your stories. And we are now at a time in our political culture in which the humanities are often the subject of budget cuts and the subject of ridicule to some degree as well. And so there are voices out there in politics that talk about the need for a skills-based education, a vocational program in higher education, one that, quote, meets the needs of a state's workforce. And subjects like history and English and languages and religion and the arts are often regarded as this kind of incidental luxury. And so what do you have to say to those critics of the humanities?
Gina, I think when you move away from the humanities and education, I think, and as you move into specialization, more task-focused education, I think there's a real risk that you build fewer and fewer problem solvers. I think there's a real risk that you build fewer and fewer leaders. And sadly, I think instead you kind of build lemmings. And I don't think that's what our education system is trying to accomplish.
Definitely.
And I definitely understand it's such a rational argument. And as a parent of putting 3 kids through college, this college education ROI is certainly on your mind. And now watching my young, my young adults looking for jobs, it is pretty persuasive to see a lot of these more vocational-based tracks help these kids land those early jobs. But at least for me, I think that sometimes maybe the longer road has been the better road, at least for me, to get that broad humanities background and then specialize for my field in MBA and then deeper financial training after that. I think that was, a better solution for me. And I would just hate to see that rational thinking, because it is a very logical, rational argument track for some of the vocationally based majors. I would just hate to see that douse the fire of humanities.
Definitely, because the humanities allow us to have intergenerational conversations and to experience and imagine the lives and experiences of other people across time. And I think it's really important to remember that every civilization creates art. Every civilization tells stories. You can go back to the Cro-Magnon peoples at the Lascaux Caves in southwestern France and see gorgeous pictures of animals that they painted some 20,000 years ago. And they wanted to create beauty. They wanted to tell stories. And so I think that it's just really important to be thinking about what it means for our human condition to have this innate desire to tell stories, to make art, and to understand what it is to be human. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.